Good day, everyone. Live from Cloud City, Seattle. This is This Just In. I'm Justin, and this is the Microsoft Reactor show for what is new. And there's nothing more enjoyable and exciting than what is new than to meet with you, Donna Sarkar, who is a lead in inclusive design and accessibility. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Justin. I just have to say, it is so fun doing a spiel with the reactor because reactors are our home all around the world. And whenever I go to a reactor event, even virtually, it's so wonderful to be able to connect with our local communities everywhere and hear from you and what more you're looking for from us.
Yeah, no, thank you, Donna. Yeah, it's one of the things that we've done a lot, I think, in the last 2 years during the global pandemic is our Microsoft reactors used to be in buildings and locations. They still are. We have 13 locations around the world, but we've taken the Microsoft reactor online, and we do streams like this, oftentimes many times per week and such. So it's been really exciting. We're starting to think about hybrids. So for those of you in the community out there, do take a look at maybe your closest location to the reactors. But rest assured, we're going to continue to be online if you are located all around the world as well. Well, let me just remind everyone very quickly, we have a reactor code of conduct. Obviously, be respectful, be polite, be nice, but engage with us. We've invited Donna here to talk about inclusive design and accessibility. So be sure to ask some questions. Log into your favorite chat platform, whether that be Learn TV or Twitch or YouTube. We are streaming on all three of those today as well. So Donna, let's get to know you a little bit more before we get into our topic. Let's begin. So first of all, you're very inspiring to me. You seem to have such a range of different talents. You're a designer. You're a software engineer, you're a speaker. I've met you through cloud advocacy and working in that as well. So what do you love most about your job right now and how you embrace so many different disciplines?
You know, I feel like everything I've done has led up to this point. And that's what I really, really love about it because my job right now, what is my job right now? I lead advocacy technology for Microsoft. So that means that I wrangle all of our product teams. So name the product team. Azure, Power Platform, Windows, Office, Gaming, Surface, the whole enchilada, right? 4,000 products, just so you know. And our internal tools. So think like our Microsoft Expense site, our HR web, our time off tool, very important. I wrangle all of these technical investments we've made, whether it's to external companies, external customers, or internal, and make sure that they are accessible by design. And that means that they're not just usable vaguely, but also good to use by all of our customers, whether those customers are internal or external, whether those customers have a physical disability like they might be blind, or an invisible disability like myself, who is dyslexic, and many of our coworkers who do have ADHD and autism. So it feels very holistic. Like I have 10 years of engineering, 11 years, a lot of years of engineering in Windows, many versions of Windows, many versions of HoloLens, many versions of Power Platform. And it feels like now being able to kind of lord over and micromanage all of Microsoft's technical investments have kind of led to this point. And it's so fun to do something with a very clear purpose. I discovered that being mission driven is something that's very important to me about 6 years ago. And if my work didn't have a clear benefit on society, I just didn't feel like I'm using my skills as usefully as I could, right? If that makes any sense. Earlier career, I don't think I thought about it that much, but about 6 years ago, I crossed the 10-year mark and realized if I'm not using these skills, if I'm not using this platform that I'm so blessed and so lucky to have to make society, leave society in a better place, then I just don't think I'm doing the thing. So this is where this job came from. And I feel very fortunate to be here. And it's pretty amazing to see the impact just on a day-to-day of the work that Microsoft does in this space.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I think sometimes, for those of you who don't know in the community, I've had the good fortune of being part of Microsoft for 17 years now. And I do start to reflect on the chapters of my career and such. And one of the things I love about cloud advocacy actually is the teaching and sharing and skilling and working with the community element of it. And I feel like that is something that we can do, whether we're teaching Python or talking about data science or inclusive design. I do feel like there's whole years of my Microsoft career that led up to that sort of interdisciplinary element of it. Would love to get back into design. That's something I did early on in my career, just a little bit as well. But goodness, all around. Well, Donna, so you have Prima Donna Studios, which I believe is fashion oriented and such. So tell me a little bit more about how do you think about where your inspiration comes from in design there.
Okay, so I am not a designer by day at all. Like a UI designer, no. Accessibility designer, no, barely. A fashion designer, yes, I am that. I went to fashion school on the side, Tuesday, Thursday nights, all day Saturday, right here in Seattle, Washington, where I am now, as a way to recover from burnout. I was thoroughly burned out by one of the jobs I had because I was too hard. Just too much. Like, this must succeed no matter what the cost, all the things we tend to do.
Yeah.
So I had to remove myself from screens, had to go create with my hands. And either I was going to fill up my house with like wood carved animals or flower pots, or a thing that I love, which is fashion. So I just enrolled myself in fashion school, learned to sew, and I've been making my own clothes since. So I formally launched my line in 2019 after enough people asked me, hey, where did you get that thing you're in? And it has given me this amazing doorway to realizing how not inclusive the fashion world is. I thought tech was not super inclusive, but fashion is really not inclusive. It only works really for one size of people who live in one part of the world with zero disabilities. And that's a problem because that's not your average person, but that's who we see on runways. It's who we see in magazines. It's who we see on billboards. So I love that running a fashion company has given me a totally different way to practice inclusive and accessible design from the beginning. Like, for example, we have a few customers now who are autistic, and they'll come to me and say, I need a textile that won't be irritating on skin. I have a customer who has had leg amputation, and she says, I want pants that just have one leg. I'm tired of having to always have pants with two legs. What a fascinating concept, right? I have many customers who are in wheelchairs, and like, I want a top that is lower in the back and higher in the front. I'm like, cool concept. But customers with paralysis, how do you design for this global market? Because these are real problems. And most people have absolutely no idea how to design a product for people with disabilities, or just from, different lived experience that we might not be aware of. So I love, love, love having this place where I can serve a global audience through something completely different than technology.
Yeah, I love that. You have your creative outlet in fashion, but also your job role also in technology, which are very, very different experiences. They can intersect, but in a sense, we have this natural world that is in fashion, and we have the digital world that is in technology. And so,
that's great.
Is there inspiration that you draw from one versus the other, and vice versa?
Definitely. So working in fashion has given me a whole bunch of different sets of questions to ask people, because in tech, it's like, all right, how do you use Office? Let me observe, right? You don't go ask people, how do you use clothes? That's weird and a little creepy. So that's a little weird. That's not like, hey, let me into your closet and show me around. So the way you figure out what people need from fashion, like what more they need from fashion, is from a whole set of different questions. It's, what are some of the events and things you've got coming up in the next 6 months? Do you have a strategy for how you pack for that or what you wear for that? What are some things that you've seen in the world that you thought were interesting? So it's more inspirational rather than practical, right? Because I'm solving, kind of a practical problem, but it's much more of a want than a need. And for technology, very much a need, right? We need this to do our job. We need this for, financial freedom. So I've never designed for want before. But now that I am designing something that truly is an optional product, it has to be something that people want because it will help make their life better, more fun, more delightful, more joyful, but not necessarily in the same way that tech does. So it's catering toward both sides of the brain, the want and the need.
Yeah.
Very fascinating that. So that's what I get from fashion to tech. from tech, I take all the same fundamental principles of design, like co-create with your audience, do insider programs, roll
Mhm.
things out slowly, apply them straight into fashion, and it's worked. Most fashion designers tend to like create a collection and make 10,000 pieces and put them into Nordstrom, right? Like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That is not how I build software. It's
Yeah.
not how I do anything. So it's very much like build an MVP, co-create with a small community of people from all different backgrounds, figure
Yeah.
out what's working, what's not working, and then offer that as an option in a few niche areas and see how they resonate before going broader. So just that insider model of like progressive rollout is something that I'm using in fashion that most people don't. They really don't use this model. So I think
Mhm.
that's why it's kind of working for our line more than most other techniques would work.
Yeah. Very inspiring. Very cool.
Mhm.
All right, well, let's begin with inclusive design and
Yeah.
accessibility. We're going to talk lots about this, anywhere from, I think, how do we define it? I think is a good place to begin. So I was doing a little homework prior to the stream,
Mhm.
just kind of brushing up myself, but putting inclusive design in context, what I learned is there's three principles: recognizing inclusion,
Mhm.
solve for one, extend to many, and learn from diversity.
Right.
What do these principles mean to you in practice as
Mhm.
you're thinking about both the fashion side and the technology side?
I love that you've done this homework, Justin, because usually I'll spend like 10 minutes on this part. So inclusive design is really the practice of making sure that everyone has a way to participate. That's
Mhm.
that's all it means. Everyone gets really hung up on, oh my gosh, what is inclusive design? I have to design a thing that works for everyone. I'm like, no, 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 no. It's a way for everyone to participate.
Mhm.
So what that means, let's just talk through Teams, for example. Teams as a product is something that is inclusively designed in many ways. Not in every way, but in many ways. So, for example, we say recognize exclusion, right? Recognize inclusion and recognize exclusion. That means you ask yourself two questions. Who am I purposefully leaving out of inclusion, right? Who am I purposefully excluding? And that is a very important question to ask yourself because occasionally you will build something that doesn't work for a specific audience, but you know that. Okay. Like, for example, Teams online chat does not work for people who don't have internet connectivity right now.
Yeah.
So we say, okay, when you're doing a video call, you need to have internet connectivity. It feels really kind of basic to say that, but you have to just list out very specifically, we are purposefully excluding.
Mhm.
Once you figure out who you're purposefully excluding, figure out who you're unintentionally excluding. That is actually the question that everyone misses, which is, yeah, I know it doesn't work for offline people. I'm like, cool. Does it work for people who are on cellular? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm like, go check, go check, go check. So it's to make a list of all of these different sorts of people with lived in types, right? And people kind of mix up inclusive design with accessibility. They're not the same thing. Accessibility is a part of inclusive design. If
Yeah.
inclusive design is the umbrella, accessibility is like a good central pillar, but it is not the entire thing.
Mhm.
So, for example, some of the key elements that you can think of when you're building for people in general are you'll say, okay, how does this work for uh, in terms of unintentionally excluding? How does it work for people who do not speak English or English, you know, equivalent? It depends on where you're building for. I think about English because that's the language that I build in. Uh,
Mhm.
think about someone who may have low or intermittent bandwidth. Think about someone who, back to the no connectivity. Then you go through the disability spectrum of someone who might be blind, someone who might be low vision, deaf, hard of hearing. But then you go all the way to somebody who might have dyslexia, might have ADHD, might have autism, might have mental health considerations like anxiety. What about someone who has lower income? What about someone who, are gender undefined? How about someone who doesn't have a credit card? Someone who might be lower on the tech literacy scale? Someone who might
Mhm.
be older? So you think through all of these factors and figure out, like, okay, who are you unintentionally excluding with your product? So that is the first part, is just recognizing exclusion and just write it all down and say, we're unintentionally excluding these people. We're intentionally excluding these people. write it out.
Yeah.
Then you go to, I'm going to build something, build for one, extend to many. So that means the way I think about it is doing no harm. So one way that Teams has included people with disabilities more is for folks with dyslexia like me.
Hmm.
The chat window has immersive reader baked into it. So I struggle with the chat window in a very busy chat. So I'll turn on immersive reader and it'll read aloud. I'll hit mute, do a read aloud on immersive reader to me. Now, this is really good for people with dyslexia, but is it doing harm to people without dyslexia? Right?
Hmm.
And the answer is no, because it's not on by default. If read aloud was on by default, all of you would say, what is happening to the chat window? Why is it reading to me? Is it harmful for screen reader users? No, because they don't turn it on unless they want it on. A screen reader usage of the chat window is completely different because screen readers read things at speed 6x, not speed 1.5 like me for read aloud. Is it harmful for people who are reading captions? Does the read aloud window, kind of occlude the captions window? No, it doesn't. It's kind of off to the side over here. So it really is figuring out, you build to one, extend to many while not doing harm. And the fundamental principle there is you have to build with real people. You can't imagine a dyslexic person. You have to find a dyslexic person, pull them
Yeah.
into your study, right? And say, all right, how would this design work for you? And what would you do in this case? What would you do in that case? And I do believe in pulling people into the cycle way before you think. So if you're right now pulling people into the development cycle, pull them into design. If you're pulling them into design, bring them into idea. So if you're thinking about idea, bring them to research. So shift left one and pull people into your process one step earlier. So that's build for one, extend to many. And the third one, what was the third one? You said it. And
Oh goodness, it was learn from diversity.
right, learn from diversity. And that's kind of this one where it really is co-creating. Because if you and I were to build a product for, say, someone who is deaf, we wouldn't do a good job without a deaf person here.
Yeah.
It's really understanding what diversity means. And for someone who is deaf, it would mean, yes, I need captions, or I might need a sign interpreter window, or I might need a combination of both. It might be translated captions,
Yeah.
depending on what language I speak, right? So really co-creating with people from whatever background you are trying to not exclude. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're, you sharing your testimony a little around dealing with dyslexia and
Mhm.
being successful, multidisciplinary in your career, and that you have developed strategies to overcome that or to work with it. It's part of who you are. And Donna, I'll even say for myself, as we moved online, one of the things that I struggle with that is unseen, that's differently abledness is my blood sugar. So I have
Mhm.
symptoms of diabetes earlier on than I would have expected in my life. And how that translates for me when I work in tech, that is that I will lose focus and get really, really sleepy. And for some reason, the Microsoft Teams, the stream, being online really, really compounds those factors for me. And so I have to walk away, or I have to really focus on focus time, even shut my eyes, go back and come back and be my best self. And so I take
Yes.
more breaks
Yes.
as a result of the technology. And so I even will set a timer to remind me to take breaks or to go
Yes.
get a small snack or to make sure that that is. So all of us, I think, in different ways are differently abled in that. And I think you sharing in that is great. Um, it sounds like, by the way,
Justin,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm so glad you shared that. I'm so glad you shared it because that's what we called an invisible disability, right? Where
Yeah.
um, it's a thing that many people just do not see. Many people we don't even know, or many things times we don't even know that ourselves because it's not so obviously a disability. But it is a thing where you've had to make certain accommodations for yourself. And step one of that really is communicating that accommodation and saying, don't be alarmed if I step away for 5 minutes to go get a drink and close my eyes. Nothing
Yeah.
to do with the situation. It's just an accommodation that you put in place. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah. No, thank you. All right. Well, you talked a little bit about inclusive design and accessibility. Let's kind of define perhaps the difference of that. What is the difference in your mind between
Mhm.
inclusive design and accessibility?
So we at Microsoft are on this quest for all of our products to be accessible by design. What that means is from the what is it called? Ideation phase. We're like, hey, we want to build a new product that helps people, I don't know, go to space with HoloLens, like just name it. What does that design look like for people with disabilities, right?
Mhm.
And looking at the range, the spectrum of accessibility, I'll go through it quickly. People who are deaf and hard of hearing. By the way, hard of hearing market, way bigger than we think. Like right now,
Mhm.
looking at you, I see you have low vision because you're wearing glasses. I also have low vision, I have contacts. But if you were hard of hearing, and the chances of you having hearing aids are actually quite low because it's not mainstream. You don't go get like a hearing test every year, right? You don't have like hearing doctors everywhere that you just pull in to go get a test, buy a pair of hearing aids at the grocery store. So being low vision is a lot more, say, normalized in society just because we do it. Our insurance covers it. It's just part of life having glasses. Every country, it's part of life having glasses. But having hearing aids, I think, is almost as important, but we just don't know how many people are hard of hearing. So
Yeah.
just pointing out, assume hard of hearing unless proven otherwise, because probably more people, I think 1/3 of people around us are hard of hearing, just pointing it out.
Yeah.
So deaf, hard of hearing, low vision, blind, limited mobility. So that might be you have paralysis or you have carpal tunnel from terrible posture,
Mhm.
which is lots of people. I'm seeing a lot of people go skiing and break their elbows. A few of our colleagues have pinged me and said, broke my elbow, broke my arm, fractured this, fractured that. What do I do? I'm like, dictation is your friend, so it happens, right? Every one of us falls into this category at some point.
Mhm.
I've limited mobility in my knees because I have arthritis. So if people are like, hey, we're going to climb up 13 flights of stairs, I'm like, can we do not that? Um, so limited mobility. Then there's speech. One is people who speak through technology or another person, so they don't speak at all, but also people who have speech impediments, like
Mhm.
we call it a stutter commonly. That is very, very common. People who are nervous or just a part of their speech impediment in life. And then, of course, we fall into the cognitive disabilities. So
Yeah.
neurodiversity. So dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism,
Mhm.
one. And then two are mental health. So you think like bipolar, anxiety, depression, etc. Seasonal depression, that's a thing. Big, big for lots of people. And I'll tell you, Justin, what is very fascinating to me about those last two are people of my age category are getting diagnosed with them now.
Mhm.
And big reason is they're pretty hereditary.
Yeah.
So people's kids are getting diagnosed at school because we actually do that now, unlike when I was growing up. So neurologists will often say, hey, this is hereditary. Let's test your parents. And sure as heck, one of our colleagues usually are the ones who have it and have lived
Yeah.
with it their whole life. And they just didn't know.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that's been really interesting to me is getting diagnosed later in life. Like I was diagnosed at age 31 years old for dyslexia at an
Yeah.
eye exam of all the things. But you look at the spectrum of accessibility and the difference between accessibility and inclusive design is just a smaller subset.
Yeah.
So if you're doing inclusive design, true inclusive design includes a far bigger spectrum. That's when you think about global usability, like, okay, someone without power in South Africa right now, which is many people on our team, honestly.
Yeah.
Someone from lower income background who may not be able to afford a high powered machine that runs Teams and, Word at the same time or Visual Studio at the same time. You think about someone who may have just any sort of, variations in they're not a cisgender person, right?
Yeah.
So that's a factor. So age, age is a new one. No one thinks about age, but we all age into things. We're living to be 117 years old. So how do we build for an older audience? How do
Yeah.
they discover your technology? How do they use your technology? How can they give feedback on your technology? But that inclusive design umbrella really is kind of infinite. That's why it's a little overwhelming. And
Yeah.
accessibility itself is a big category within it, but it is not the whole category.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, Krydobai asked, by the way, is this a live session? By which I reply, yes, because we've had both a little bit of sound issues and my
Yep.
lights just shut off in
Ah,
my live stream here.
wave your arms around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I'm gonna have to go dance and light them up here again. But before, first, I'll ask you just a quick question, Donna, on
Mhm.
that. And so on that subject, I think one of the more humbling insights is that we humans, we have bias, and part of as a designer is learning how do we overcome those biases, even the ones that are conscious or even unintentional and stuff. And so, how do you practice overcoming bias, maybe in what you're doing in technology here as well?
I love this question. We all have bias. It doesn't matter how unbiased we think we are. I often feel that I am a fairly unbiased person, and I realize that I need to check my bias on that. Um, the best way, honestly, is to know that you have a bias and to check your assumptions. I tell everybody I have an opinion on it, and I'm ready to be proven wrong at any time.
Hmm.
So I often people ask me, "Hey Donna, do you think that someone who is blind will use this feature?" And I'll say, I don't know. I'm going to say no, but I'm ready to be proven wrong. Let's go ask someone.
Yeah.
So I lean into lived experience more than most people. I do not assume that I understand people's lived experience. It doesn't matter if I live with that person. Like, for example, my partner has seasonal depression with the weather.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, like, cool, if we have this lights and that lights, I'm sure it's going to be better. I could assume that. I could go invest in a bunch of IoT lights that make, simulate sunshine. Or I could just ask him to co-design it with me. So my solution is always, and you'll hear this from me a million times, it's let's co-create. Let's go talk to the person. And if you don't know the person, you are not in a position to design it for the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that's probably the number one rule is if you don't know anybody with that lived experience, do not be designing for that person.
Hmm.
And we live in a planet with 8 billion people. You can find a person who has that lived experience. And if you don't know anyone, you don't have an audience. So really it's from the beginning co-creating. And you will have probably 50% of your biases checked. Like, oh, I was wrong, but you would have learned something.
Hmm.
And probably the most important thing you'll learn is do not assume. And I will tell you, even in the world of fashion where I think I know things, I know nothing.
Yeah.
I know nothing, nothing, nothing. And even when it's something that I feel like I have solved because I've done so much research on it and know so many people, until I actually sit down and do a verbal interview, verbal or typed in real time interview, not a survey, like real time interview, um, I don't actually fully understand the problem that I'm solving.
Yeah.
So I would really encourage people do the field work, talk to
Yeah.
the humans.
I have a joke in perhaps my more personal life, although I think I joke in the workplace a little bit. But by age 25, I felt like I'd figured everything out. And by
Yeah.
age 35, I realized how little I had figured out
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
life. And I think that, that is it's a statement of a journey that I went on as an individual and overcoming my own biases and privilege and other things in my life as well. But it was one of those things that when one comes to that realization, it opens you up to a much broader world because you no longer you might rely a little bit on your gut or your instinct. I like how you said it, where like here's what I think, but let's go try, let's go listen to people and things
Mhm.
like that. You can. It's human nature for us to have our gut and our
Mhm.
instincts. But it's good to stop and then to cross check or to explore further or stay curious a little longer, as I
Mhm.
once heard someone tell me, and things like that as well. So very, very important.
Mhm.
Speaking of human, human interest, human adaptability, there's kind of an emerging field of adaptive design, and that technology can adapt to the needs of people. How do you incorporate adaptive design into some of the things that you're doing here as well?
So adaptive design, when I think about it, everyone's it's a newfangled term.
Yeah.
Um, and I think of it as something that evolves as you evolve.
Hmm.
So one example is you think about captions in
Yeah.
Teams or in Windows, right? Windows 11 now has captions, um, inbox offline available. It's in
Hmm.
the insider beta channel, I believe. So captions get better as we use them more. and we send feedback on what is working and what is not working. So I think of that Azure Cognitive Services that powers all of our captions, whether it's for Teams or for Windows 11, to be something that is adaptive.
Hmm.
The more people use it, whether it's me
Yeah.
using it in my house, using it in my car, using it in this room that has less connectivity than that room, the more adaptive these captions become for my personal use case. Likewise, you and I know that the AI we train is biased to be like us. You and I are both located in the United States. We speak with mostly Americanish accents, but many people in the world speak English. And is our cognitive service model trained to listen to somebody from Ireland or from Kenya
Hmm.
or from Barbados? These are all English speaking places, but are our captions in English trained to reflect what they're saying as
Yeah.
well as people from Seattle, Washington? So I really, really think about adaptive technology as being a more intelligent way to do inclusive design, but we are not even close to checking the box on adaptive design, like not even close. Um, a lot of people like to throw around the word. They're like, "Oh, this is adaptive fashion." I'm like, no, that's just fashion that works for someone who might be in a wheelchair. That's not really adaptive fashion.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
accessible fashion.
Yeah.
Adaptive fashion would be something that works for people as they change in some way throughout their
Hmm.
life. Then that fashion would adapt. Um, but technology, I think, has the greatest chance of adapting because it's software. We're going to
Yeah.
be far more likely to be able to change it. Some wheelchairs do, where they raise and lower depending on the mood, the day, the need, etc., etc. But again, I think many of those things tend to be gimmicky unless they are co-created with people with disabilities. I've become so highly aware of abled people uh, in some way designing for people with disabilities without consulting them.
Hmm.
A huge thing that happens every year is people build sign language gloves. They're like, you put on these gloves and they sign language for, this is ninja, not sign language, just so you know. And then people who are deaf can understand. And I can tell you, every deaf person in the world is like, oh no, not sign language gloves. Unless the sign language gloves are designed by a deaf person, these sign language gloves are not going to work for deaf
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
I can tell you that because I work with a lot of deaf people, and exactly zero of them use sign language gloves with any sort of success.
Yeah.
So it's really like we shouldn't get overly caught up in we're going to create a solution for deaf people. We should be co-creating from the beginning on whether the solution is even worth pursuing.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand. Yeah. Well, Donna, are there some projects or inclusive design or accessibility that you want to share that you're working on, or someone in the team that you're working with and such?
Okay, so I want to share with you one of my favorite inclusive design things recently. And a lot of people don't know about this, so I'm going to just talk through it. I'm going to just share my screen and I'll describe what I'm doing. So if any of you can't see the screen, you can follow along later. So I'm just doing a screen share and we're just looking at our screen right now. I'm going to go to my desktop, click on the search box. I'm on Windows 11. I've moved my taskbar over to the left where it belongs, just saying, into the search box. I'm typing clock into the search box and I'm clicking on the clock app. So up comes the Windows 11 clock app. And all the way on the left side, you're going to see a thing at the very top of the menu that says focus sessions. It's the default thing that we're on. And this is a basic Pomodoro. If any of you have used a Pomodoro sprint, which is a quick way for people to be able to focus, um, and you can do that here without having to pull out your phone or use an app in a browser or something like that. You can set the focus time to be, it's default at 30 minutes, but you can set it to 45 or 15. I know the team's working on more timings based on feedback from many of you. You could hook up your Microsoft To Do here, and you could hook up your Spotify. And I love this feature so much because first, it's very useful for me. Two, it's something that was co-created with people with disabilities from the very beginning. The
Hmm.
product manager on the team, the product managers, they are neurodivergent. and they say, wow, it'd be great to have this tool, Pomodoro, we use baked into the operating system that we also use. So it was inclusive designed from the very beginning, from the idea phase. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be good to have this tool we all use into the operating system, idea phase? Then let's design it. Where would it go? Would it be a separate clock? No, no one's going to find it. Why don't we use something everyone uses anyway? Clock app. Okay. So from the design phase, then the development phase, all right, let's put it into insider builds so people can try it and give us feedback
Yeah.
beyond just us. So development. Then the testing phase of let's get the feedback and make this better. They're in testing right now, right? Because it's still an insider build. It's rolled to GA, but they're evolving, getting feedback, putting in more and more into these focus sessions. So when you think about the product cycle of idea, design, development, testing, this was factored in from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
So it's one of my favorite examples of inclusive design, since it's not some humongous tool. It's not like, oh, let's redo the operating system. It's simple, it's elegant, it's helpful. And so many people need and love this product. It could be whether you have ADHD or whether you just struggle with focus like I do. Like probably most of us struggle with focus nowadays, but I love to set a focus session and just get through email. 30 minutes, get through email.
Yeah. You know what I love about that example, Donna, is that the feature was ultimately put in the clock and in the time element of the operating system. There wasn't an accessibility center or a separate application that you need to cognitively load and know to where to go.
No.
Focus room app or things like that. And I think sometimes the tendency in software technology is that there's an app for that, and we just create more and more and more apps. And there's good reasons for that, obviously. But the fact that it's integrated at the moment by which you might be thinking about time is a really, really great insight in that feature and such. We actually have some good audience questions. So I'm going to take a couple of those because I think they're quite pertinent to designing. Krytabai has been asking, designing for all is always going to be more expensive. How do you justify that extra cost for a product for differently abled people, even though they may not use that at all?
So the main thing with accessibility all up and inclusion is not to fall into the ROI trap. A lot of leaders are like, well, if we spend X many months on this and it only serves Y many people, is it worth the ROI? And the answer is not yet.
Yeah.
So here's the thing with accessibility. People with disabilities are incredibly networked and have a higher net worth than we think. Because it's most people. We're all going to age into this. Therefore, I am that control freak who wants to build a world I'm going to live in someday. And the more we normalize building accessibility, the more normal it will become once we all need it. But apart from that, a lot of it is if you can build a product that takes somebody who cannot use your product at all and gives them a way to use your product, is that not worth it? And the answer is yes. Or would you rather take a product that people can use kind of and use it more? We're like, which one of those has more benefit, right? If you're just looking at active usage, go from like 10 hours of active usage to 12 hours or from 0 to 10. I'd rather help that new customer on board to my product, right? Because you're just opening the doors to more and more people using your product. But I get you. This is probably the number one thing that leaders, engineering leaders, business leaders struggle with, is trying to measure this in terms of raw numbers with ROI. But really, it's future looking. We at Microsoft look things in terms of horizons. Like Horizon 1 is benefit 1 year. Horizon 2 is benefiting 2 years, whatever. Accessibility really is a horizon forever. All of the work we're doing around sustainability as well. No, it's not going to save the planet next year, but it will save the planet. That's the point. You're not going to see the benefit next year. I think we live in a society where we have to see the business results next quarter. We're not doing it. That is not the way the world was built. That is not how self-driving cars are built, rockets, HoloLens devices, PCs. That is not how any of the stuff we rely on daily were built. So we really have to look beyond the ROI trap and look at is this going to impact the world in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? And how can we be leaders in normalizing that?
Yeah.
Role modeling.
Yeah, I totally agree. I used to work in the Windows team, and for people who opted in, we had telemetry. And
Mhm.
one of the debates that we used to have would be, if you see a feature that only gets like 1%, or
Mhm.
sometimes we're talking about users in the millions or even
Yeah.
billions. And so,
Mhm.
you'll implement a new feature and say it's being used by 0.21% of the population.
Yeah.
And we would have these impassioned debates about whether well, do you get rid of the feature because it's just not used? It hasn't hit that magical 5% or 10% or things of that in an operating system. But the other side of that argument is that no one is aware of it. It's undiscoverable, or we have not yet created an operating system that is fully inclusive for that
Mhm.
particular feature that we're trying to do. Maybe for that 0.21%, that feature is profound. I mean, life changing, and makes
Yeah.
the biggest difference in their
Yes.
productivity and such. And so I remember that from our own, and having those discussions of like, how do you delay that judgment? How do you delay
Mhm.
that decision to not move forward with the feature when you've got 800 features that you all got to pack into the operating system this season and such. So it's hard.
Mhm.
It's not easy. It does depend, but I think what I hear you saying is delay that judgment. It's wait a little longer, listen,
Yeah.
bring more
Mhm.
users into.
Listen and get real feedback from people. Don't just look at telemetry and numbers. Get real feedback from users. Figure out, like, okay, who is using this and are they using it for business or life critical activities?
Yeah,
If they are you willing to take away something that you don't want to maintain from X people who use it to live their lives and do their business because you want to introduce, more widgets,
yeah,
for
yeah,
example, right? And honestly, we as Microsoft, we have to be responsible. We cannot continually introduce products and not help more people use them.
yeah,
We can't keep building products for the same extremely privileged 1 million people,
yeah,
100 million people, and ignore the rest of the planet. That's not actually a responsible thing to do. That is not living the mission of Microsoft, empowering every person,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if that is how we think about our products, then we need to kind of check ourselves and our biases,
yeah,
because we are now skewed toward the 98052 people just like us mode. Um, and I honestly think one of the reasons we work at Microsoft is because we don't want to build for people just like us. If we wanted to do that, we would have been done. We could
yeah,
have like checked that box and moved on with our lives. We were done 20 years ago. But the reason Microsoft has done well, very well, is because we're constantly striving to fulfill the needs of a bigger total addressable market, which is 8 billion people.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned 98052. So for all of you out there in the
Yeah.
worldwide community, that is the zip code for
Mhm.
Redmond, Washington, USA,
Yes.
where I'm him right now on Microsoft
Mhm.
campus. And so
Mhm.
you're so right, Donna, that we've got to get outside of these buildings and meet our users all around the world in order to
Mhm.
build a great product and such. Speaking of that, what resources does Microsoft have for if you're a developer, a designer, a small business,
Mhm.
your own startup and such? What resources do we have as a company that helps all of our customers, all of our community out there?
So we've got a ton of just general resources around accessibility. If you search for like Microsoft accessibility, you'll find like a ton of resources. But I'll tell you three that I find very, very useful. One is, of course, our inclusive design toolkit. And if you search for Microsoft inclusive design toolkit, you'll find it. It's a bit out of date at this point because we actually haven't had a dedicated inclusive design director for the company in a while. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So one is that just helps you think through, and we're looking at it right now. You just search for aka.ms, MS inclusive design, and you'll land on the inclusive design toolkit. It's free, open source, downloadable, not open source, downloadable. Use it however you wish.
Mhm.
Second thing is we have a thing called accessibilityinsights.io. So if you just go to accessibilityinsights.io, it is a browser plugin. If you run just a thing called FastPass TestPass on your website, you will get a list of bugs that are causing accessibility issues. And this works for a browser, it works for Android apps, it works for Windows apps. This is a really good way to figure out whether during your development cycle, whether you are being accessible by design or not. So inclusive design toolkit is design phase, idea phase, actually, idea design phase. Accessibility insights is once you've done development. And the third thing we have are access to all of these folks in the world who use Microsoft products, who are very, very happy to give you feedback on your thing, right? So one thing is really appreciate like the hashtags, like hashtag A11Y, which is shorthand for accessibility, and accessibility advocates and all of this on social media. Most people really do want to participate and co-create with you. So reach out on social media. On Twitter and LinkedIn are the two most accessible places for people with disabilities or accessibility advocates to hang out. Really lean into them. And fourth one that I forgot, of course, for productivity is we've got a free Microsoft learning path for accessibility. And you can just look up Microsoft Learn Accessibility, and it's really, really fundamental, where it'll tell you, how do you make your Office documents more accessible? How do you think about writing an accessible email? These are just good for everyone. And the more you get used to the habit of doing these things, the more it'll just become second nature to you. Ironically, I took this and I was really surprised to learn a bunch of stuff. So even if you think you know everything about accessibility, take the Accessibility Fundamentals learning path. You'll learn a lot about how we are accidentally excluding people without even realizing it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate those resources. One
Mhm.
of the ones that I use myself too is PowerPoint. We have a PowerPoint accessibility and inclusiveness checker. It's
Yes.
not perfect, but it's certainly something that we're learning
Mhm.
as a company and trying to infuse more. But I realized that some of my design preferences on slides used to be very inaccessible, particularly for people who struggle with sight and color blindness
Mhm.
as well. And so what my preferences were for what I thought really looked cool on a screen was not super friendly for people who just want high contrast or things like that too. And so
Yeah.
some of those features, when you use Microsoft products like Office 365 or Microsoft 365, we are increasingly building those natively into the product line as well. In fact, if you are out there and you have bugs or feedback for us, we have incredible outlets. Hit me up at Justgar, and I can make sure that gets to the right place in engineering and things like that too. But we do care, and we are striving to build more inclusive products by design, as well.
So, okay, I'll tell you one thing, Justin, especially for you and those of you who do presentations. One of the best things you can do to be inclusive during the presentation is describe what people are seeing.
Yeah.
You watch me do it, right? Like I'm clicking here, I'm typing here, this is coming up. So act as if you are describing commands into UI automation, right?
Mhm.
And just say, how would you describe it to somebody who is not looking at the screen? If
Yeah.
you're explaining to somebody on a phone, how do I get to blah? What would you say? So you'd say, click on start menu. Do you see search for clock? Do you see clock? Yes. Click on clock. On the left side, you see this. Click on here, you'll see this. So just say, here's what you do, here's the event. Here's what you do, here's the event.
Yeah.
And just describe what you're seeing and describe what you're doing, because that actually is one of the most inclusive things you can do. Since in presentations, often I used to do this, be in the front of the room presenting. People in the back, they just can't see it at all, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, at all. And just walking through what you're doing is really helpful. And it helps people who might be blind, who might be low vision, might be in the back of the room, or they may not be from your country and have your cultural context. They
Yeah.
may not get your weird inside joke. They may not get like what this picture means or what significance it has. So I always tell people, imagine your boss is in the very back of the room. They are from another country and you're explaining to them what you're doing. I'll fix you right up so fast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things that I once learned, I try to remember is when I'm giving a presentation, even just repeating the question,
Yes.
because oftentimes in an auditorium, not everyone can
Mhm.
hear what the question was.
Yeah.
So that was a little predate. Now we're doing hybrid. We've got a great chat
Mhm.
window there and such, but it's
Yeah.
something I took to heart as I learned as well.
Okay. By the way, in PowerPoint, I keep talking about PowerPoint now.
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah,
In PowerPoint, in the slideshow ribbon thing, click on it, and all the way on the right side, it says turn on subtitles. Just check that box. Do it
yes,
now.
yeah,
Do it now, because then you'll always have subtitles on in every single PowerPoint you give. You don't need to mess around with like, is it on in Teams, not on in Teams? Do you see it? Do you not see it? It stays. After I've been doing that, I've gotten so many good comments from people saying, thank you for turning on subtitles because I am hard of hearing, or thank you
Yeah.
for turning on subtitles. I have ADHD. It really helped. Thank you for turning on subtitles. I do not understand your accent, woman. So
Yeah.
I've gotten all three of those comments last week. I gave an in-person presentation in Prague that you and I were talking about, and three people came up to me independently and said, thank you for turning those on. I
Yeah.
hadn't realized that you could do that. So now before I start a presentation, I actually tell people, here's what I'm doing over here, and here's why I'm doing it. And I just
Yeah.
explain. And now other people are starting to do it. That makes me really happy. So do yourself a favor, just do it now, and you never
Yeah.
have to think about it again.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Don. I should do that for this just in on this
Mhm.
show too, because
Yeah.
we're streaming through StreamYard, our product
Yeah.
here, to multiple channels. But I'm actually using PowerPoint, and so
Mhm.
my computer can be hearing
Yes.
my input and
Yeah.
subtitling as that. I will try that next week. That's
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
Thank you for that advice and
Sure.
such. Great. All right. Well, we've got just about a little less than 10 minutes and such.
Perfect.
So I want to get to the skilling and the career
Yeah.
element of this as
Mhm.
well. So if you are a person who's looking to become a designer, get involved in inclusive design, where do you start? What kind of skills do you learn? What do you recommend?
So I am very much a hands-on sort of person. And I believe that you could take anything that exists today and think about how would you design it to have the same functionality but be more inclusive,
Hmm.
and really build out your portfolio in that way. Okay, to be clear, I'm not a designer. Okay, so I've never actually built a design portfolio. I'm just saying what I would do as a developer or as a fashion designer.
Yeah.
So if I was a fashion designer, I'd say, let's look at shirts. How would I make them more inclusive for people who might be in a wheelchair, people who might have arm paralysis, people who might, not have one arm, might be, in a wheelchair, and really work through the disability spectrum and figure out how you would redesign something to um, be more usable and inclusive for people
Mhm.
like that. I would also do a bunch of research into things that have been done in the past. So, just one pro tip, a group of people who've been thinking about inclusive design from the beginning are architects, because buildings have to be, not have to be, buildings should be inclusive for people of all, different disabilities to be able to
Yeah.
get into. So, think about how architects think and go and look at buildings that exist and
Mm.
look at like revolutionary buildings. Like there's that museum in New York that has no stairs, it just has ramps,
Yeah.
because it's good for, yes, people who might be in a wheelchair, but it's also great for people who are dragging big paintings upstairs, people with, parents with strollers, people with arthritis like me. So
Mhm.
it's just a more inclusively designed building. So think through some of the existing paradigms that exist, why those decisions were made, how would you would make them differently, how would you do the research, but really work through specific case studies of how you would think about this from the very beginning, from the idea phase. And then because I'm a developer and I'm very hands-on, I would say go and design something, figure out a problem that exists, figure out an audience, go through the checklist and say, who am I intentionally excluding from this conversation? Who
Mhm.
am I unintentionally excluding? How can I go and co-create with them this specific user problem? That can be, I'm going to prototype an app that does something. I'm
Mhm.
going to prototype a website that does something, and really build your portfolio around these things. And again, it doesn't have to be shipping code. You could use, design tools like Figma. You can use low code tools, which I'm always going to tell you to use low code tools to build a working prototype. Um, but really figure out how to get hands-on experience with this. When people come into interviews with me, I will often ask them, like, what are some real things you've done? And the ones who have theory and good ideas, I'm like, that's cool. That's great. I'm glad you thought about it, but did it work? Because often, going back to that point, checking our biases, theories are great. I want to see it in execution. I
Yeah.
want to see from idea to, yes, I put this into the hands of people with disabilities and they say, yes, this will work for me. And here's why.
Yeah.
So really, it's something we do every single day here at Microsoft. I was in Prague last week, like I was saying, whiteboarding with one of our product teams on a problem that we've been trying to solve for about 6 months. And really, it took getting into a room and whiteboarding and saying, okay, who do we have on staff? that's going to help us walk through with this. And that's what it took to actually have a person with specific disability type come in and walk through the scenario and say, like, what does this window look like? What does this window look like in this situation? What does this window look like in that situation? And really laying out the actual fundamental design with a person with disability sitting on our design team, right?
Yeah.
So co-create with, like, really co-create with. Don't just put bits in front of them and say, will this work for you? Yes or no. It's, is this problem a problem for you? Gather the requirements, don't gather solutions.
Yeah. No, I really like your practical and applied element of it. What have you tried? What have you learned? What did it work? Those types of things. It also just sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I think of all the different job roles one can have. Obviously, it takes a village. That's one of the beauties of, in previous episodes of this Just In, we've talked about data science and machine learning and AI and all these other different things, web development and such. But all the different job roles I think we've explored and such, a user experience researcher and focused on inclusive design, it just sounds amazing and interesting because you get to really work with real people from around the world and really understand. That just seems, super powerful. I will add for all of you. Oh, sorry, I was going to say real quick. Yeah, I was going to add just for all of you out there, it is ranked on LinkedIn's top jobs of 2022. I think it's in the top 10 and such. So it is definitely something that is growing as well, because let's face it, we need more user experience researchers and program managers of design as well.
I will tell you that a lot of people believe that inclusive design is a design problem, but it's actually an everyone problem.
Yeah.
As the owner of a fashion company, it's my problem. As somebody who is a developer, it's also my problem.
Yeah.
As a product manager, like I have many on my team, it's also my problem. So just like security is an everyone problem, inclusion is also an everyone problem, because it's just about how you serve more customers. How do you serve a billion customers? We all have to be hands on deck and being able to, check our biases across each stage of the product cycle. So let's not always push it on like the researcher or the designer. Let's every single person in the chain, from user researcher, designer, developer, tester, product manager, it's an all of us problem. And we should all have inclusion at top of mind at each phase, because that's how you're really going to make a product that's just not an idea phase inclusive, but when you ship to the customer, get their feedback in. Just even the feedback loop. What does your feedback look like for people with disabilities? Is the channel you're using to get feedback, is that accessible by a screen reader? Is it? Like, I don't know. Is it voice recorded thing? If it's voice recorded, like, is there another way that people can upload their feedback? So really, really think through the entire product cycle and how you're being inclusive and accessible by design.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we just have a couple minutes left on it. So first of all, I just want to thank you so much for being part of our series here. Very interesting conversation. Obviously something that's very inspirational for me and such. So do you have any other parting advice or thoughts for our community out there as they're thinking about a career in inclusive design and accessibility?
So first of all, Justin, these questions have been probably the most thoughtful and well-researched that I've had. I'm interviewed quite a bit. I do a lot of podcasts, a lot of talks, but you deeply thought through not just the 100 level of, hey, Donna, what do you do? What does that mean? Can you explain an example? You went really deep on this. You really thought through every aspect of my work, whether it's cloud advocacy or being a developer, fashion, and you drilled deep to get answers that are actually going to help people, versus not just get people curious, but help people solve like specific problems. So I really appreciate the time you spent to research this. This has been just a delightful experience. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Donna. So, well, y'all out there, yes, have a great day. Thank you again. I will leave our slide up here if you're interested in some of the Microsoft Learn modules to learn about inclusivity or accessibility, or Microsoft's resources that we have. There's also a great blog post that we spoke a little bit about, but not all disabilities are visible. We talked a little bit about our own areas of a differently abledness that are not visible. As well. And so again, thank you all, and join us next week for this Just In. We're actually going to take a different step. We're going to move to what's new in data science and machine learning. So really getting into the Python and some cool data stuff there again. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you again,
Thanks,
Donna.
everyone. Do the thing.